Based on a dream, we decided that the 7 educational theorists we studied in class could best be critiqued by connecting each author to a character in Peter Pan. The story of Peter Pan is appropriately linked to the theories of curriculum because J.M. Barries' main character, Peter Pan, refuses to grow up and lose a sense of childlike awe. In connection to curriculum, many teachers have lost sight of the child in the classroom because they are so concerned with standardized assessments. We believe that some of these theorists are trying to bring back imagination to the classroom by allowing students to question and wonder.
Wendy is the caretaker of her brothers John and Michael, and even Peter Pan at some point. When she arrives at Neverland, she is put in charge of the Lost Boys. She is loving and caring, but is not directed merely by emotion. She is logical and responsible and allows her brothers and the Lost Boys to learn things for themselves throughout the story. Noddings, while focusing on care in her writings, is not highly emotive as one would assume. Her description of care is a logical interaction between two people, the one caring and the one cared for. Noddings is reflected in the character of Wendy, who plays the mother figure to her two brothers, Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. We chose Wendy to represent Noddings because of her caring and empathetic demeanor in addition to the caring relationship displayed between her and her mother. When Wendy and her brothers unexpectedly leave for Neverland, her mother, Mrs. Darling, holds on to hope that they will return. J.M. Barrie explains that our heroine Wendy knew that the mother would always leave the window open for her children to fly back by. So they stayed away for years and had a lovely time. According to Noddings, Wendy, who acts as the one being cared for, responds to her mother's care by trusting that her mother would leave the window open. Noddings would identify the relationship between Wendy and her mother as caring because both parties contributed to the relationship in characteristic ways.
Tiger Lily is the Indian princess who fiercely challenges authority when she's captured by Captain Hook and the other pirates. While angry in scenes, she sticks to her own culture, refusing to beg for mercy from her captors while she follows her own path in life. Nieta would be similar to Tiger Lily given her focus on multicultural education. While she argues for an additive approach to culture in education, she herself takes a deficit position whenever she views the advancements made in education in the last few decades. To be sure, Nieta would take offense to the portrayal of people of color in Peter Pan. There is an entire song, "What Makes the Red Man Red?" that enforces negative stereotypes. She would probably agree that Captain Hook, being white and the villain, still has greater power in society and thus has a responsibility to treat the Indian tribesmen better. Nieto would want educators to celebrate the collective identity of Tiger Lily and her tribe and use that as a strength and not a source of weakness. In terms of education, if teachers struggle against institutional policies and practices that are unjust, if they begin with the strengths and the talents of students and their families, then the outcome is certain to be a more positive one than it is currently the case. Noddings, like Tiger Lily, is an advocate for challenging the status quo of racism in society.
The Lost Boys are a group of young men who thrive in the outdoor environment. They build their own forts, explore the island, and fearlessly interact with nature. They refuse to be confined to the indoors, which could be a metaphor for society. Louvre was not focused on education, even though he connected his theory of nature deficit disorder to the classroom. He would celebrate the fact that the Lost Boys are learning through experiences, and that they do not spend their time indoors and plugged into numerous technologies. J.M. Barrie said, "If growing up means that it would be beneath my dignity to climb a tree, I'll never grow up, never grow up, never grow up, not me." In his book, Louvre recounts a story from his youth that involves building a tree house. He explains that he has a soft spot in his heart for tree houses, which have always imparted certain magic and practical knowledge. As we become adults, we stop climbing trees. Whether it is because we are scared or we think it is silly, there is something that keeps us from playing in trees. Louvre would argue that it should never be beneath our dignity to climb a tree because tree climbing teaches us to trust ourselves and our abilities. If I had to guess, I would bet that the Lost Boys were very confident in their own abilities due to years of climbing trees and running through the wilderness.
Peter Pan is a young man who refuses to be restricted by traditional norms in society. He adamantly rejects greater society to create his own community in Neverland. Ayres would be Peter Pan because he focuses on liberating the curriculum. He would argue that at some point, one must challenge authority and create an appropriate learning environment that meets the needs of the individual learners, much like Peter Pan did with Neverland. Even though they rejected traditional society or learning constructs, the Lost Boys were better off for learning by doing. Peter Pan explains, "When the first baby laughed for the first time, the laugh broke into 1,000 pieces and they all went skipping about. And that was the beginning of fairies. So there ought to be a fairy for every boy and every girl." This quote seems ridiculously impossible when read at face value. However, if biases and opinions on what is ridiculous and what is not are put aside, this quote becomes full of childlike wonder and excitement. Through the character of Peter Pan, J.M. Barrie has created a learning environment free of convention and expectation. Peter Pan introduces his audience to a fantastical and whimsical world that is his reality. Just as Ayres explains that we need to provide our audience with opportunities for discovery and surprise, Peter Pan does this by inviting Wendy and her brothers to come and experience Neverland, rather than just telling them about it. In addition, Peter gets his audience actively engaged with hands-on material by teaching the Darlings how to fly and leading them on various adventures through Neverland. In his own way, Peter Pan liberates the curriculum by taking Wendy, John, and Michael from their ordinary lives and introducing them to the possibility of a world with pirates, crocodiles, and mermaids, where children never have to grow up.
Mr. Darling is the father of Wendy, John, and Michael. He's quite emotionless and stoic throughout the story, and he's also very objective and rational. Ralph Tyler can be equated to Mr. Darling because he is the father of objectives. In his book, he does not have a strong agenda, but merely explores how one would go about creating a curriculum and appropriate objectives in a learning environment.
Captain Hook is the villain in Peter Pan and has a very narrow, focused goal in life. Hirsch would be Captain Hook because he too has a very narrow goal in his theory of education. He believes that education be focused on reading comprehension and building background knowledge.
Tinker Bell is a fairy that engages multiple senses daily. She flutters between the greater society and Neverland and is able to create change through magical fairy dust. Eisner could be equated to Tink because he wants to open up the possibilities of education outside of the normal realm of traditional modes of learning. Experiences are paramount to Eisner, and Tinker Bell is anything but an inactive bystander in life. Peter Pan is in the Darling Children's Nursery, teaching them how to fly. He explains that all they have to do is think of one happy thought, and up they will go. Wendy excitedly exclaims, "I think of a mermaid lagoon underneath a magic moon." John interrupts, "I'll think I'm in a pirate's cave," followed by little Michael, who explains, "I think I'll be an Indian brave." Each of them thinks their happy thought, and before they know it, they are in the air flying toward Neverland. Wendy, Michael, and John each needed their own unique happy thought to be able to fly. In the same way, Eisner argues that students need to be able to experience and express themselves through different forms of representation in order to fully understand a concept. Wendy, Peter, and Michael each needed to sense their own happy thought in order to learn how to fly.
We hope you have enjoyed our analysis of Peter Pan and the 7 theorists that we have studied in our class this year.